Hello, everybody. It's Mike Yao with Savage Kingdoms role playing game and Fire Net Productions. So it's not the main reason that I'm going to talk about today. I haven't done a video in, oh gosh, probably a month, 6 weeks. I've been kind of letting the YouTube channel sort of slide a little bit. It hasn't been a lot of views and stuff like that. And I got far more important things to worry about, especially now. So I just want to update you guys on where I am currently. I'm at my mother's house east of where I live in western North Carolina, because no doubt by now you've heard or you've experienced what happened there, the disaster. And I don't want to go into too much of that. There's definitely some stories there of horror and terror, but also of like heartwarming things of mountain folk people in general just working together. Some of the stuff you've already heard. I'm such and such. The media has covered some of it. The media, as many of us with any kind of life experience knows, are not particularly accurate, and they are usually very agenda driven. So what some of the images you've seen obviously are accurate, but a lot of times they're taken out of context. I would say overall, the situation is much worse than the mainstream media is showing. I know, shocker, surprise. Um, but there are pockets of civility. Like I went back a few days ago to my house just to check on things, and apparently a new bridge has been built so we can get in and out with our vehicles, because that was a week and a half or about a week before that happened. Some people built a footbridge. I went through the chasm a couple times on foot just to get out into the greater world, see what was going on, etc. Blah blah blah. So anyway, I returned to check on all of that in the house, and everything was fine. But for the most part, by fine I mean it was basically like it was. A lot of the trees had been removed and cut up. I helped with some of that. My main job actually on the first 5 days of like survival mode, or 6 days, was running around delivering messages to people that lived off old mountain homes that even further off into the mountains than we are or were or are. So I was kind of running around gathering information was kind of my main job, and then eventually I would get out to see communications and get food and water and all this stuff. But anyway, there are pockets of western North Carolina that seem to be fine. When I was traveling back on a few days ago down I-40, if you just kind of look around at the beauty of the mountains, all that's still there, obviously. But when you get into the hollers, as we Appalachian people say, more into the mountain valleys and the crevasses, kind of further away from quote civilization. And when I say civilization, we're talking about Asheville's kind of the big city in that area, and that's still not a very big. It's only 97,000 people officially in the city limits. I think it's a little bit more than that, but still, point is, it's not a very big city per se. And then you've got towns that are a little bit smaller, but close, like Waynesville and Hendersonville, and then from there you've got smaller communities like Swannanoa, which you've probably heard of because they got just devastated. Black Mountain, um, Burnsville, Spruce Pine, Mars Hill, all these wonderful places. Little Switzerland, Banner Elk, etc. And these are up in the higher mountains. Banner Elk, I think, sits at 4,500 feet, almost a mile up. Spruce Pine is up there, I think, around 3,500 feet. Burnsville, 3,300 feet, I think. So my point being, even they're further north and up higher, they still got damaged because the storm was so strong. The wind wall was ridiculous. It was 2.5 times the size of Katrina, actually, as far as if you look at the maps. And this is all official information. You can look it up. And that's not to compare Katrina, because that was a horrible devastation as well. My point being is that they're very similar. This one being even larger, meaning that's how it was able to reach into the mountains. I think, I'm not a meteorologist, but just using a little bit of common sense, having a little bit of life experience, I think that's how that would have a lot to do with it. In addition to a warm summer and all this, the global warming and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I'm just going to kind of ramble for a bit. I just want to catch up on several things. So part of it's rambling and some of it's therapeutic. Um, but hopefully you're still with me. And I just want to let you guys know that Karen, my wife, and I are safe, and my two cats, Nymeria and Callie. We're at my mom's, which is the background here, which is why you've probably never seen this background. And my former videos, because I'm nearly 200 miles away from where I live, and still hopefully will live. There's still no power. Speaking of which, power keeps popping up, and I keep getting messages from lovely folks going, hey, is your power back? And my answer has been, it's still going to be 2 more, maybe 3 more weeks. I'm sorry, I've literally was at ground zero the first 6 days, walking, run around the mountain valley, delivering news, checking on people, survive, blah 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 blah. And I saw all of the hardware, all of the infrastructural equipment that does carry said power and electricity, and most of it, power poles broken, cables in the water, equipment in the flooded creek that we had that blew out our bridge. Going back to what I was talking about with the bridge earlier. So yeah, knowing that crews are going, now that they can finally get in there, that's the good news. Now we have a temporary bridge capable of holding larger trucks. They can get in there, but I think we're just, sadly, we're probably kind of lower in the list, even though we're off kind of a main road. So anybody most of you watching this probably live in Western North Carolina. Asheville's very kind of, I wouldn't say unique. There's obviously other mountain communities across the country and world that are similar, but it's like you have this city, and then you go about 2 miles, and you're kind of, I wouldn't say wilderness, but you're in the rural area. Well, actually, if you go another 10 miles, you kind of are in the wilderness. So even though we're only 6.1 miles, I think, from downtown Asheville, and we do have an Asheville address, we are actually technically closer to Swannanoa, which got it really bad. So northeast Asheville, Swannanoa, all the way to Black Mountain got pretty nailed pretty hard. Burnsville, a lot of areas did. I'm not trying to compare. I'm just trying to let you guys know what's going on, because you have to weed some of this reality of having been there with what the media is posting. And like I said, not to slam on the mainstream media too hard. It's been done enough, and they sort of do it themselves. A lot of that imagery obviously is actual imagery. In some ways they play it up, and then in many ways they play it down. So I understand people make mistakes, and we're all trying to make this up as we go. But like I said, it's worse than it looks overall. And the reason I say that, I'm not trying to say that as a negative person, because in general, I'm a very positive person if you know me. But I'm also a bit of a realist in this. As I get older, I'm a little bit more of a realist, and I'm more awake to what's kind of going on out in the actual world, etc., whatever. So, having been there, there's a lot of people trying to help, but there's really not a whole lot of progress. And what I mean by that is that we're all trying. There's a lot of people that have come out of state giving supplies, and contractors, power, linemen, and uh, National Guard and stuff. So everybody's trying to do it, but the reason it doesn't look like a whole lot has been done in the last 9 or 10 days is because there's just so much. It's just so much. There's just human, like some of the mountain valleys and the mountains we're in. And Appalachian mountains are kind of, sometimes are kind of made fun of as like they're just big hills, and the Rocky Mountains are the real mountains. Whatever. These mountains are actually larger than the Rocky Mountains 9 billion years ago. They were actually the largest mountain range on the globe. It's pretty much agreed by geologists. However, over time they've been kind of worn down, because 9 billion years old, that'll happen. Um, but there's still lots of treacherous, weird, like ravines and stuff. If you live here, you know what I'm talking about. Or if you've done any hiking as a visitor, you've probably seen more of the gentle areas. But if you're a severe hiker, you might see some of the stuff I talk about. So, point to all that being that it is kind of hard to get back in some of these mountain communities that people live in, and some people choose to. Some people are old timers. Their family, they've had this land handed down just through generations and generations, and that's great. They're holding on to that land. That's awesome. Others of us choose to live there because I'm not a particularly urbane person. I've been there, done that down in Atlanta for a long time. So a lot of us choose to live in these areas. And it's great because nature, and you can see all the photos. I mean, it's a really amazing place. That's why so many people move there. However, it turned against us during this event, 10 days ago, however long it's been now. 12 days ago, I think. Almost 11 and a half days. Wow. Seems like in some ways it's been 2 days, and in many ways it feels like 2 months. I think mostly it feels like it's on the longer end. It's funny how we perceive time differently in like times of crisis. Normally we track time in like days, maybe hours. But when stuff like this happens, you're now tracking time in a minute, like minutes, maybe hours at some point, because you're like, boom, boom, I got all this stuff I got to do. I got to check on people. I got to get water. I got to make sure the tree didn't crash on this person, and are my pets still in the house? And bears are now getting desperate for food because they're semi-dependent on us. And blah, blah, blah. Anyway, you guys all know all this stuff, probably most of you by now. But I wanted to give you another perspective, and I'm definitely not one of the people that's out there every day at this point. Those guys are amazing. Some people have no choice; they're still trapped or semi-trapped, like they can't really go too far because maybe their vehicles have been totaled by downed trees, such as our neighbors. Shout out to them and guys. The guy's medically trained. He actually it was kind of running the whole little medical group that was in our mountain valley or mountain holler. So that was a blessing that he just happens to live kind of the mountain cabin, the house next door. But yeah, some trees did some damage. Speaking of which, make that all make sense what I talked about the little medical unit. So the first day or two, we're all just kind of nobody knows what's going on, like confused, like what just happened. I wondered out pretty quickly. The storm was kind of really still going, and my wife is kind of getting on me a little bit about, well, there's still stuff flying out there. But it wasn't, when I went out, it wasn't quite that bad. Like debris wasn't flying everywhere, and there wasn't water everywhere. Fortunately, we were off of a creek, which did overflow, and it did flood, and it was pretty bad, but not nearly as bad as people on the main river, which is the French Broad River that runs through Asheville. It's actually one of the few rivers that runs north for a while. It cuts to the mountains, eventually empties in the Mississippi, blah, blah, blah. That's the main river. It runs through Asheville. Asheville is mainly a river valley within the mountains. Which is what happens when these storms come in. I know it seems like hurricane in the mountains, 400 miles from shore. What? Uh, but perfect storm of events happen, global warming, heat, powerful storm, et cetera, dumping water onto a mountain valley, and that's what happens. Also, the secondary river is the Swannanoa River, which is a pretty good size. I think I've never really looked at them. I have looked at a river map, but I can't remember it. But I'm assuming it's a tributary of the French Broad. I would almost guarantee that's the case. They might run independently, but I doubt it. In any case, that's like the secondary river that overflowed, and that's done a couple times since we've lived in Asheville, which has only been 10 years, 7 years in this particular mountain valley that we're in. And so that's actually flooded a couple times, nothing. So it's everybody's kind of used to it. The road that goes along it's like, yeah, Swannanoa River's flood over again. Everybody just go around it, whatever. But this time, obviously, it was far worse. There were tractor trailers being carried down the water, and just you've probably seen the imagery. Entire buildings completely covered, or maybe a foot or two of the roof sticking up. So we're talking, 12, 15 foot water surge from the river. So, after the first couple days, that finally started to kind of drain down as water is wont to do. But then that produces mudslides, and people are still trapped, and power lines are down, and trees are down, and roads literally entire roads have disappeared, swept downhill, or just completely broken up that you can't traverse them. Even on foot, it's like challenging. So, all of that stuff, all that infrastructural work, and the fact that new power lines have to be put up, and there's God love them, all these people here to help, which is awesome. And we ourselves are helping ourselves. In fact, it was just us good old mountain people the first 4 or 5 days that really did most of everything. Not to slam the government. I don't want to be that guy. It's like, oh, government didn't do nothing for us. That statement is both correct and false. So meaning that it's just common sense, people. It's just people surviving. First few days, you have to rely on your neighbor. There's nobody coming in. That's just survival mode. And then after a few days, you do expect some officials to come in and help, FEMA and National Guard, and they did. But again, I don't want to be that guy that says there's not enough being done, because I don't think that's true. I think there is a good bit, or at least trying to be done. I just think that it's, like I said, it's so spread out into mountain valleys and crevasses and ravines and mountaintops and such that it's really, really hard logistically to get everything organized and out there. I mean, it's really more like a military operation than it is anything else. So that's what's going on in my world. So we're still my lovely moms who let us kind of come in here with her cat to finally gotten kind of used to the area. The black and white one took a few days. She kind of hid for a while. I felt, I felt pretty. I was really worried about her actually. But cats do that. Cats are good at kind of. They'll just kind of chill in their own little zone and just kind of. And then after a few days, they come out because food and water is a driving force for us mammalian creatures or any creature for that matter. And then the other cat, Callie, was pretty much she's was seemed to be fine running around the house, but she had her only way of dealing with stress, which is a good, it's a good point. Animals, cats, dogs, hamsters, rabbits, turtles, whatever, all have stress responses just like humans. So and we all kind of do it in different ways. But I don't want to over paint it completely dark. I mean, we're far better off than a lot of people. There's some people better off, but there's probably more people worse off than we were. Our house did get hit by a tree, but it just kind of glanced. It just kind of tore the gutter system down. I kind of knocked it little pieces off the corner, but it did not breach the actual interior, so that's good to know. Rain and wind actually got in. That tree has already been kind of cut up. The damage has not been repaired, at least when I was there, whenever it was, 3 or 4 days ago. But that's tertiary compared. That's not a primary or even secondary thing at this point. So that was done. Still no power. We are well water, which is great because that's usually it comes from a mountain spring, so it's really nice and right, like clear and cold, and it's awesome. But it is driven by an electrical pump, so we're still relying on the power to have the well water drawn up. I guess if I really got desperate, I could break the well open and be old school and dip a bucket down in there. But fortunately, it hasn't been a need to. We did eventually get water after a few days, and fortunately, we were semi-stocked up on that. Karen bought a bunch of water for her show that she was in, and ended up getting canceled, her one-woman show. So we're probably losing money there, and I'm sure the theater is. That's a whole other thing as well. Uh, Show I was in, Murder on the Orient Express, got canceled as well. Although I just literally received an email about 10 minutes before I made this video, uh, 5 minutes before making this video, that it is going to be rescheduled. So that's a good thing. At least not only is this like kind of an art, but it is a source of income. We do this professionally or semi-professionally, so it's good to get some gigs. My tour guiding gigs are, I don't know, I think for at least 2 or 3 more weeks, or I haven't seen any of them. They're actually on the books, but nobody's booked them because what tourists are in town, and only the morbid would really want to walk around and on a guided tour looking at all the destruction, particularly in the River Arts District, which is one of my tour zones. The irony of that is that I've done this River Arts District tour for 3 years now. And one of the stories is one of my kind of favorite parts because it's really fascinating is when I come to a building in the River Arts District that has a flood line on it. It's called the Riverlink building, and there's artists at the top story, etc. It was a carriage repair house and a bunch of other things. It was one of the original buildings from the 1916 flood. And the flood line of 1916 flood line mark is right up there, and I always talk about it because people just marvel like how high the water was. Then you walk to the back of the building. That's where the tour goes. At least that's where I lead people. And then there's another mark at the back of the building. It's about 10 feet up, and that shows that the entire first story was swallowed, and probably a foot or two into the second story. Back in 1916 when this happened. But apparently this event has surpassed that one by, I think, like 30%. Which is ridiculous. If you've actually been on the tour, or if you do any research about the 1916 Great Flood in Asheville, well over 108 years ago, which is why it's called a 100-year storm, that is ridiculous, and this one surpassed it. And it just blows my mind still that I talk about this story on the tour all the time. It's kind of like la la la. It's a fun little story. Not fun. I mean, obviously it was sad, but it prefaces how the River Arts District started with all these kind of abandoned buildings for a long time from said flood in 1916. And just to kind of talk about it, like that happened such a long time ago, and then suddenly it actually to occur is just bizarre. So, assuming that building has survived again, which I probably think it is, it's was an old school brick mason building, when they built buildings to last, probably still there. So I don't know if I assume someone's going to put a new flood line up there, but I imagine it's going to be I'd say probably 5 feet higher, 3 to 5 feet higher than the old flood line, which is ridiculous. So assuming, I don't know, I don't even want to think what's going to happen to the River Arts District. That is part of the life line of Asheville. It's a very artsy community. Obviously, people come here for the mountains and hiking, and now it's a foodie city, which now maybe it's not as much anymore. But art is like a big thing. We're performing artists, but it's probably more known for fine arts, and that whole River Arts District. It's just, yeah. Anyway, so I just want to let you guys know what was going on. One of my tour guide routes is also downtown Asheville. That wasn't as bad, but it's still pretty messed up. And then I do a ghost tour, which is really a shame because it's October and the ghost tours would be really getting booked. Nothing's booked. We go through the Montfort neighborhood to the second part of the ghost tour because there's some good stories in there, and then Montfort's really messed up. We start at Riverside Cemetery, which is a little bit higher up. So I think the Riverside Cemetery is, I think what I've heard is mostly okay. It is called Riverside, though, and there is a river, really just a creek or stream that runs next to it, and I imagine that overflowed. So the lower part of the, and again, I'm guessing here, just using kind of basic geography, I'm pretty sure the lower part of the cemetery would have been overflowed, which is where the German officer graves are that I like to talk about all the time and stuff like that. And there's also the amphitheater down there where people perform outdoor. I was about to say I've only done one show there ever, but then it wasn't even Shakespeare, but perform a lot of outdoor Shakespeare there. I think they're okay. I did see some pictures. There was some damage, but it actually wasn't as horrible as I would have thought. I think mostly because they're kind of over a hill. They are on a decline, but it's after an incline away from the river, so I don't think it would have made it above that. That would have been really amazing. Yeah, so again, I'm just kind of rambling, just catch you guys up. So as you can see, so income for me is going to be pushing it a little bit for a while. Again, there are people in far worse shape, but I just want to throw that out there. So bringing me to my next point about my gaming stuff, the reason the 4 people follow this channel, the reason for it. It used to be I would do acting and acting techniques, but nobody really seemed to care. So now I just do about the gaming stuff, where 4 people care. Okay, maybe 8. So maybe I'll do more of it at some point. I don't know. I keep saying that. So I'm still working on Red Sun. I was gonna kickstart it next February or March because that's actually a really good time for Kickstarters. Research. Because it's a little far enough out from the holidays, and yet it's before summer and a bunch of vacation stuff happening. So people usually have a little more money, and they could be more supportive of your art, of your craft. But I might do it. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. I might do it in the next week or two because to help with the income. Not that I really make a lot of much. Actually, the last Kickstarter I made like zero money on. Actually, lost money. But it can, if the Kickstarter does well enough, it does grant the creator like at least some income to toy with a little bit. Not toy with, I mean, buy groceries and pay rent and stuff, or mortgage or whatever needs to be done, car payment. But so I might do that Kickstarter in the next couple of weeks, but I don't want to seem like I'm coattailing off of the horror, the apocalypse, which has just occurred and possibly about to occur. I don't want to leave out the people from Florida because I have a lot of good Floridian friends. And the weird irony is that because Milton is on its way as I'm doing this video, currently is still at Cat 4, I think, Category 4. I think it was a 5 not long ago, but I think it went down to, but 4 is still ridiculous. That's what Helene was. So Milton's on its way. But the irony of people, I know several people live in Western North Carolina have another house in Florida, and they're kind of what we call halfbacks, snowbirds. And they go back and forth, and some of them, and a good friend of mine who's actually very supportive of my gaming stuff, Savage Kingdoms and Red Sun, was going to escape down there on this little vacation their family had planned forever. So the irony is that they escaped here to go to Florida, and now Milton is coming in. It's just what the heck, just ridiculous. So they're having to readjust, I'm sure, or hunker down. I know several people are like that are true Floridians are like, it's a hurricane. Like this is part of the culture, and they're probably going to just kind of stay. But a lot of experts are saying you should probably get out of that the main swath path, projected path. So anyway, shout out and prayers to the Floridians dealing with Milton and possibly South Georgians as well, maybe right in the southeastern Georgia as well, Savannah and stuff. Yeah. So where was I? Yeah. So I made Kickstart the Red Sun. That game, I have that game 95% written. I've been able to work on it the last couple of days. It's so bizarre. I was talking to my mom and my wife about this. The first week after the event, I couldn't focus like I tried to. I thought, oh, I'm going to read some. This will be some great escapism. Maybe I'll do some writing and game design. Nothing. I couldn't stay with it more than 15 seconds. And when I finally had power, power, it went to my mom's house who has power. I was just watching YouTube crap all the time just to take my mind off of it. Feeling slightly guilty, having survivor guilt, which is weird, but it's a thing. Thinking that maybe I should have stayed and helped with what little efforts I was doing, getting water to people and information and food and whatever. But a lot of people when the bridge got built, left our valley too. I'd say only maybe half of the people, maybe a third, are still there. True dedicated mountain people, or people that they're just hunkering in, or didn't have the means to get out of the mountain valley. I think at this point, everybody could get out if they want to. So the ones that are still there are probably just chosen to, or maybe are elderly. That was another concern. There were like some elderly people or people that needed medicine, prescriptions or whatever, and they're trapped back there. No, but nothing's happening for like 3 days. Finally, like day 3, or maybe might have even been day 4. It might have been late in day 3. We finally see a helicopter come over. And the first few helicopters were more like personal or maybe news helicopters, and then finally, like day 4 or 5, we start seeing military copters. And apparently, one landed. Like I said, I went back, whatever it was, 3 or 4 days ago, just hours before I arrived. Apparently, a big old Huey or Chinook military grade helicopter landed. We do have a pretty large field in the middle of the valley. I mean, it is a valley after all. It used to be tobacco fields, from what I understand. Good place to land a copter. And so I think it landed. It's either that one or there's another flat area further back in an area called Jones Cove. I don't want to say too much about where I live, but anyway, I don't know, whatever. So they land back in there, I think, as well. And that's kind of where we were having these mountain meetings after a couple of days of wandering around, like what's going on. Finally, by day 3, I think some of us got a little organized. We started having these little gatherings in this old barn, this cool barn, actually really cool. A lot of the barn was missing pieces, and there was holes in the roofs, but the main structure stood. And we had these kind of cool meetings, and people would bring their food, what's left of it before it rotted, and we have like a kind of a cookout or whatever, or a potluck, I suppose. And then we'd have meetings about what to do. We broke off into different skill sets. Like we had the tree cutting guys, which I probably would have done, but I don't actually own a chainsaw like an idiot. Nor even a really good axe, which is kind of weird as a medieval weapons guy. You think I would have like some kind of axe. I don't, at least not for chopping wood. So I like to do what I'd already been doing for a day or two before unofficially, quote unquote, was running around. Even though I'm, getting up there in years, I'm still reasonably athletic, so I was able to kind of clamber over logs and like go through the water and the broken bridge, all that kind of nonsense. Actually, at the time, it was not nonsense at all. It was very, very real. So I decided to do that. Karen as well joined me like a day later, and she would go around and gather information. That's my wife. She's very organized and good at writing down people's addresses and what their needs would be. And so I sort of did that. And there was another group that was the medical group, like I said, headed by my next door neighbor. And there was another group. I guess it was the food group, and then eventually there were like some smaller. It was like the fun group, I think, and they kind of were in charge of like doing kids games with the kids. But like my wife and I said, we noticed like the kids are kind of unaffected because they're on one level not quite sure about what's going on, and two, they're really good at just kind of adjusting and having fun. So they were a lot of the younger kids were just kind of like life had not changed. And these are mountain kids, and credit to them. These are kids that live off in the country and in the mountains. And so they're just doing they're swinging on ropes and climbing mountains and just doing what mountain kids. So like in some ways, nothing really changed for them other than electricity. And honestly, there's this old mountain house not really that far down the road that I'm not sure even had electricity. I think it was completely off the grid anyway. So that person, I finally met that good old mountain lady, good old North Carolina mountain Appalachian lady. And I don't, she like nothing was changed at all for her lifestyle. But she was out there like helping like clean up the limbs from the tree, just with the log team, actually the tree team. I think she was kind of on. Anyway, so yeah, we all sort of band together, and then once the bridge was actually before the reinforced bridge, the temporary bridge came. I wouldn't say fake; it's actually quite a good bridge. Um, there was a workaround, so a guy's house burned down. This in the first few hours of the tragedy, a person almost got killed by flying debris that was saved by Noah from bleeding out. And then they had the life. I don't know how they got the guy out. I think it took hours, and they had to stabilize the guy. And then somebody's house burned down because their generator kicked on. It was on auto, and I think they weren't at home, which is good. It saved them. But the entire house burnt just to a foundation, just down the road. This beautiful house with a private drive, which triggered the fact that now that guy's gate was open. I mean, it's a tragedy what happened. In some ways, it was a blessing for the rest of us because we can now. He had this like little private cut around, little juke as we called it, around the bridge and around the river. Actually, still had to kind of cross the flooded river. So the first few days it was just flooded; it was almost impossible. But as the river started to recede or creek receded, you could finally use this little mountain pig path, and that was our little escape around and hooked up with this other road and. Out near the volunteer fire station, which is awesome that we have a volunteer fire station about 2 miles away from our house, actually just about a mile and a half. But then the irony of there is it sits low on the river, so it was completely flooded. It was under about 3 feet of water for the first few days, and so they weren't really able to do much. Um, anyway, just a whole blah blah blah. I said I wasn't going to go into detail, and now here I am about all of this. This whole thing was mostly to let you guys know that we are essentially okay. We're just waiting for power to return at our home. We're kind of invading my mom's space. She's been very cool. We've had a couple other friends reach out saying, hey, if you want to stay with us, it's cooler. We're sort of considering one of them because they are closer, and I would still be able to do what little work hopefully I can get in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Um, I am able to do some work online. I do run games professionally for like youth, and so I might instead of running them in person, I might offer some online versions of those games, which keeps the kids occupied and they love it, but also gives me a little bit of income. My wife is able to work a little bit her non-performing job for a school for a cyber school that she works for. She was able to work some of that online. So that is, in a nutshell, is why the main reason we came to my mom's. We probably would have stayed actually a few more days, just sleeping in the dark with no air condition. It wasn't horrible. And just getting up at day, it became very much. We lived very much like in the Dark Ages or Little House on the Prairie era, as we call it, where you're up at sunrise, you got to do all your stuff, and then the sun comes down, and then that mountain valley, especially with no electricity, it's dark. It's just there's yeah. Other than flashlights, and then you had to kind of ration in that because you had limited batteries, right? Fortunately, all three of our kind of little flashlights they held out the entire time because we used them fairly sparingly. Although one night apparently I fell asleep with mine on. Anyway, it was. I guess it's still working. I left it back at the house. But the main reason we got to power is because we needed internet and we needed to start to make some income. Because the first thing you worry about is survival, water, food, and stuff, and that's as you should, and other people. And then after a week and a half, you're like, all right, well now we have to worry about paying for all of this damage that insurance or FEMA isn't covering, which isn't much. Um, how are we going to try to get back to life and earn some legit, money? So income. And so that's kind of the main reason we came here, actually. Yes, it's nice to have a warm shower and electricity and television or whatever, but really the main reason was for the internet. But back to the gaming really quick. So yeah, I might kickstart this Red Sun game because it's mostly done. I'm still debating. I also have the next edition of Savage Kingdoms. Not really ready, but it's about 40% done. I already have that. I already know what I'm going to do with it. I already know the changes I'm going to make for third edition. So all that stuff has already been kind of done either in my head or set down. Um, but I think Red Sun is the better choice because it tested every time I've play tested it at Dragon Con and other places. It seems to test out better. Savage Kingdoms always does well too. I'm very happy and even maybe a little proud that both game systems people really seem to like. Um, but Red Sun is kind of tested out better. I think and I kind of enjoy running it better. It's easier to run. It's easier on my aging brain. I used to do all these quick mental calculations in my head that's required in Savage Kingdoms. Sometimes in D&D even more so to some degree. And I'm still okay at that, but I just don't want to anymore. So I designed Red Sun to be a little bit easier mathematically, which it totally is. But with still having enough complexity and robustness as Savage Kingdoms is known for, but not quite to that degree, because I think that not only does it make the math easier, and when the math is easier in the game, the mechanics get less in the way. You can focus more on the storytelling. I know people say this over and over, but it's so true. You can get the nonsense out of the way. Make the skeleton of the game, as I call it, kind of hidden inside the flesh. The flesh is the storytelling part of the game. That's the main reason people play. Game mechanics are great because they help support that. And yeah, it is fun tweaking numbers sometimes. I mean, I admit I like that part of the game as well. But at the end of the day, it's really all, for the most part, really about storytelling and role playing, and that's the best way to do it. Is when there's less stuff to worry about. Yeah, I designed Red Sun that way on a purpose. Now, SK has its own quick shortcuts away from D&D as well. As you probably know, if you've followed or played the game, the attack roll and damage is like it's an all-in-one roll. So it's all calculated there. You don't have to. D&D sometimes takes. Don't get me started with this. Just forever. Just roll the. Just literally 2 minutes for somebody to add up all the freaking dice and everything. As much as I like running for the kids, but it's so frustrating. And then the new player's handbook, which I didn't think I was going to buy, but I bought just for the heck of it. The 2024 edition 5.5, whatever they're calling it. It's just worse. They've added more dice. So you got to roll. So everything is boosted upwards. I know that's a big shocker, as we grognards had predicted was going to happen. It's really well organized, though. I like some of the art's good. Some of it's just weird, not very inspiring, but some of it's actually really good. It's a little uneven. The layout format's actually really nice, and I do like that about the new player's handbook. Now that I'm suddenly on this subject randomly, and I think the new stat blocks are good. They're fine. A lot of people were raving about it, like they're not really that different. But yeah, they're fine. Um, but some of the spells are ridiculous. You guys, I don't know if you've heard about the lawnmower effect. There's these spells that move along with you and create damage. So it's a lot of people call it the lawnmower effect, and I don't know if the designers weren't thinking or just don't care, and they just want everything to get ramped up even more, as if D&D needs more ramping up. It's already, what's everybody call it? And I kind of agree that it's like Avengers on steroids with furries. If that's your style of game, that's great. I think we all have reasons we do this, and all have our own favorite subgenres of fantasy. It's not really my thing. Some of my kids players really get into that, and so I'm supportive of that because I want them to have a good time. But at the same time, have kind of a good, even though I might be getting paid for it, I kind of need to be invested and have a decent time myself. So anyway, so in my kids' games, I'm probably just going to keep running the 2014 Player's Handbook, because even though it's still D&D and it's so ramped up a little bit, it's not bad. It's pretty good. So I don't think I'm going to run this new system. Anyway, it's just too much, just much. I think that's going to wrap it up. 40 minutes. Hopefully you guys are still with me. If not, well, hopefully you got something out of the first bits that you watched. So yeah, we're fine. We're getting by. Hopefully power, like I said, I think it's going to be 2 or 3 weeks. I hope to be proven wrong. That'd be awesome. To have it up in 3 or 4 or 5 days, that would be amazing. I would be completely shocked. And not that people aren't trying. Like I said, there's a lot of talented, hardworking people out there, especially in Appalachia, and people that have come in from other regions as well, helping out. But I'm just looking at the reality of the thing, and there's so much other stuff has to be done as well. There's other, like, our bridge was out, but there were hundreds of other bridges out to other mountain haulers or going to other locations. We actually probably might have gotten ours back. I wouldn't say the quickest by any means. That would have been more primary roads, but maybe somewhere in the middle. So thankful for that. Thankful for you guys, all 12 of you watching. But share the video. Maybe ask some other people to subscribe, and maybe give me some reason to continue this channel other than this kind of rambling and ranting for a little bit. Love you guys. I just want to check in and look for the Kickstarter soon if it's going to happen. I'm still kind of back and forth because I don't want to feel like I'm taking advantage of this situation. If I do Kickstarter, please know that is not my intent. That is not the case. It would only be because I might need a little extra income from what little income I can usually glean for a Kickstarter, because most of it goes to hiring graphic designers, artists. Publication itself is hard. Like paper costs, like everything is like gone up 30 to 50%. So that's where in Kickstarter, that's where those of you who are not familiar with crowdfunding projects, that's where the vast majority of it goes, unless you happen to make hundreds of thousands, which I know this is not going to happen. It'd be great. As long as unless you're clearing it above the overhead a good bit, none of that's really going to the creator, or very little of it. I think in past Kickstarters, the ones that, like the first Savage Kingdoms ones, when that first was coming out, some years ago, I actually did have a little bit to, like, I could kind of pay myself for all these hours of work. It wasn't a lot, but I think I might have managed to maybe have $1,000 maybe. But that still goes to bills and whatever else. Everything else goes to publishing, just so everybody knows. So, all right, enough rambling. Want to let you guys know that. Love you guys. Talk to you again soon.